Welcome to Agency Bytes, a podcast for agency owners, hosted by agency veteran and coach Steve Guberman. Agency Bytes is a podcast focused on delivering actionable agency information from agency experts in about 25 minutes. Why 25 minutes? Because who has the attention span for much more these days? And you can squeeze in a listen between meetings with time for a bathroom break or coffee refill before your next meeting.
Welcome to Agency Bytes, a podcast dedicated to helping creative entrepreneurs thrive. I'm Steve Guberman from Agency Outsight, where I coach agency owners to build the business of their dreams. This week, I am thrilled to be joined by Jessica Malnik, a messaging strategist who's helped over 75 B2B founders and lean marketing teams nail their positioning and craft messaging that actually gets read and gets results. She's spoken at conferences around the world and has been featured in outlets like the Wall Street Journal, South by Southwest, and Winter. Jessica, it's great to have you here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Steve.
Yeah. So you run your own strategist firm. Tell me what the kickoff was that, what that was and how you got started and what kind of work you do now.
Yeah, absolutely. I can go way far back, or I can just kind of give the summary version, which is probably much more relevant. So
Sure.
like many others, always grew up knowing eventually I'm wanting to do my own thing. Kind of grew up around entrepreneurs for a long time, even before I went up on my own, was kind of freelancing on the side for several years, and eventually made the jump about 6 years ago, and have been doing this ever since.
And you primarily serve B2B or strictly serve B2B?
Strictly serve B2B, 96%. I want to say I've done a little bit more on the prosumer than consumer, but yeah, it's all B2B. Usually software companies, oftentimes also professional service firms. So think your lawyers, your accountants, recruiting firms, that sort of thing.
Agencies, we all need writing and strategists and positioning and messaging and content and all that.
I work with so many agencies, so it's a great niche to be in.
All right, so don't say any of their names, but tell me some of the biggest blunders you've seen when an agency comes to you and says, all right, I need your help. And you're like, wow, I can't believe you did that. What are some of the biggest mistakes you've seen?
Maybe I have a good filter around my process, but I haven't really seen any big mistakes from agencies that I've worked with or agencies that have kind of approached me. I can just say in general, one of the things I see from maybe on the outside looking in or from chatting and kind of chatting people is not any agencies that I've ever worked with, but other ones tend to almost blend in too much. And I feel like especially now with the rise of AI and more competition than ever before, being over commoditized is like a real risk and kind of a race to the bottom if you're not careful.
Race to the bottom. Yeah, that's usually price-based. In what ways are you seeing race to the bottom from like a content standpoint?
Yeah, I would say in general, I want to say like the $99 sort of low barrier to entry content mill types. And now are increasingly turning into AI content mills. I would say that sort of model, maybe, unless you really have can compete at scale, might not be a great model to be in 6 months, 12 months, or 20 months. And you could argue it was probably not a good model to be in at all, but particularly now with the amount of competition and also with AI and with tech changes, I would be wary of that sort of model. But what do you think?
So if it gets the work done, if I get content, if I get posts, this AI robot or whatever is giving me things that I can publish, Tuesday, Thursday, whatever, what's really the downside of it?
I mean, the bigger downside that I could maybe see, and maybe this is feel free to play devil's advocate here, is why would I pay for an agency to do this when I could just do this myself within ChatGPT or Claude or Jasper or Insert Gemini or whatever?
Yeah, there's too many tools to even mention. So it's more AI aided is really the way to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the topics, maybe finding out what's resonating from a search standpoint, but building it out from a human standpoint, there's just no equivalent to it.
Yeah, I would say if anything, I am super, super AI assisted with my workflows. I'm always looking for new systems and new ways that I can kind of be of service to my clients, but also kind of just improve my own business, right? And you'd be kind of crazy not to be using AI in some capacity right now. But there's a very big difference between just being like AI 100% versus AI assisted with kind of some human guardrails in there as well.
Yeah, trust but verify is a phrase I heard recently that really resonated with me.
Also
Talk
applies
about
to just managing teams as well. That also just applies to managing teams.
Absolutely. Yeah. I trust people to do what their jobs are and what I've delegated them to do, but I'm still going to kind of verify, did you do it, not necessarily the right way, but did you succeed and get it done? And how do we celebrate that? Yeah, absolutely. Talk about what your process is when you're approaching kind of a content machine project.
Yeah, great question. So I have my own signature framework that I developed over the last 5 years called the Marketing MOAT framework. And basically the whole premise behind that is there's so many teams that got so enamored by like quote unquote the HubSpot playbook, where it's like, hey, let's just produce all this content. But unless you have HubSpot's budget, HubSpot's brand positioning, and everything else, you're kind of not playing on an equal playing field, and you just wind up on a content hamster wheel, getting ever more diminishing returns. And those returns are much less, particularly nowadays, than ever before, as there's so much signal and there's so much noise and not enough signal that just trying to compete on volume alone is a very quick race to the bottom, and also just not necessarily as efficient. So my marketing mode is all about helping teams do more with less, but also get much more compounding results and having a much higher signal, even if you have a lean team and or a lean budget.
So MOAT, MOAT, like the water around a castle. Is
Yes.
it not an acronym? Because when I was reading it on your website, I was really hoping for an acronym.
It should be an acronym. It is not, but there
We
are
need to make
basically
that one.
3 key points to it. There's kind of the messaging piece. There is the community / distribution piece. And then there's also what I'd call content efficiency, which is, are we actually taking every evergreen piece of content that we have and making sure that it is being disseminated in the right places at the right amount of time and doing it over and over again, so that you're not just creating, hundreds of pieces of content a month that all basically dies and ends up becoming decaying content that actually can have negative impacts if somebody sees it after, for example, I have clients all the time where they do a product launch and then suddenly they have an article from 2019 that has like old pricing, old messaging on it, and it ends up confusing your buyers.
Gotcha. So making it evergreen is essential. So can you take us through kind of those 3 channels of the MOAT?
Yep, absolutely. So kind of the first piece and the most important one, and obviously the most obvious, is messaging, which is, and there's kind of some key pieces to it, to making sure that you have a really high signal that's going to resonate with your ICP. First and foremost is, do you have some sort of spiky point of view? Like, why are we writing about this topic? And what is that kind of originality nugget that's in there that's going to make a big difference? Typically speaking, it doesn't need to be 100% original, nothing is, but like, what is a 10% or that 25% that only our brand can talk about, or only our founder can talk about, or something like that, and kind of extracting that detail, super important. The other really important piece of this is also what I'd consider content positioning. You have brand positioning. Well, each individual asset that you create also should have the same sort of positioning behind it. It's like, what is kind of that context setting in here? How are we making sure that we're connecting our brand to that piece? It can be super loose if it's top of funnel, but you should still be thinking about that. And then of course there's things like making sure that if it is, for example, SEO and increasing now with AI search as well, are we making sure that, if that is a distribution channel, is it optimized for that? That sort of piece matters, but definitely it's content positioning, and it's also having a spiky point of view are so important and oftentimes overlooked.
Interesting that before you jump into the next channel, it's interesting that you talk about uniqueness, and I love that you say there's really nothing unique. Everything's kind of been out there. But I do find that, so I spoke at a conference recently, and the day before I spoke, somebody else covered a lot of the content that I was going to cover. I got really flustered, oh my God, my presentation's botched now. And then it dawned on me that the way this person delivers the content is different than how I'm going to deliver it. And what this person, the way this person resonates might be different than how I resonate. And so even if I'm not completely and totally unique and I'm sharing content that's similar to somebody else, what I say might land differently than what somebody else says on the same exact topic, positioned a little differently, right? And I think that's just kind of a cool thing, that somebody else might not be the right cup of tea, but you might be, or I might be. And so I say that because a lot of people that I talk to about content, they come out with this imposter syndrome, like, who wants to read anything from me, or who wants to hear from me? And it's like, maybe a lot of people do, you don't know, right?
Yeah, you said it so well. No one can tell your story the same way that you can. So like that originality piece could absolutely just literally be like, what is your own lived experience, your own expertise, your own things that you've done that you can kind of infuse into that piece is 100% oftentimes enough. And then I see this all the time as well with a lot of the clients I work with, where there's a curse of knowledge. And the more knowledgeable you are about that topic, and I see it all the time working with a lot of technical founders and a lot of like technical CEOs, is like they get so in their head because they know all these things and they almost forget to be like, oh, like not everybody knows that, and not everybody else has that story, and being able to extract that can be extremely powerful.
Yeah, I love that. All right, so that's the first section of MOAT. Take us through the second.
Yeah, so kind of the second piece is distribution. Obviously, content is great, copy is great, but if nobody sees it, what's the point? So the kind of the next piece of that is, and this is also infused in messaging as well within the strategy, and I talk about distribution at the very beginning of the strategy, not just as an afterthought, which is what a lot of agencies and a lot of software companies in particular do. It's like, are we making sure that we're producing content in the right places where our ICP hangs out? So I'll give the example of social media, even though there's many other examples you can give here. If you're, want to be producing things on LinkedIn, but your content, your audience is only on Instagram, it does not matter how great your content is on LinkedIn. It's not going to do well if you're not producing it for the places that your people hang out. Sounds obvious. And the other piece of that as well is, are there ways that you can kind of get your customers and or your prospects and or like influencers in that space bought into that content and helping you co-create it? Because if they are involved in it, you're just going to get a lot more out of that content. And also, oftentimes, that's a really great way to kind of spread your reach, particularly if you don't have the biggest budget.
Any tips on how agencies, or even like whether it's presenting from the agency standpoint or the owner's thought leadership standpoint, how do they find out where their audience is? So hopefully they're niched. Hopefully they know who they're targeting, who their ICP is. How do they find out where they're hanging out?
Yeah, great question. So first and foremost, if you haven't done it recently, ask people. Two, there's definitely audience research tools out there as well. I'm a big fan of a tool called SparkToro. Really great for being able to kind of dive into niches in general. But to start off, don't overcomplicate it. If you know your audience hangs out in a certain place, go there and just start to test it and see if that's going to land. But then use a tool like SparkToro or even something like Ahrefs or SEMrush can also just be a good way to kind of offset that information. And also don't forget about things like Reddit.
Yeah, Reddit's huge. Have you experienced working with a client and found that their audience wasn't on LinkedIn? Is there an audience that doesn't exist on LinkedIn yet?
Oh, absolutely.
Really? From a B2B standpoint?
Yeah, I would say in general, and maybe this is because it's a little bit more of my background, e-commerce, particularly like D2C and e-commerce, are definitely like smaller brands. So brands that are, 7 figures, 6 figures, 8 figures, a lot of them are on LinkedIn, but there's definitely subsets of that market that are pretty much only on like X or formerly Twitter, and or like Reddit or like niche communities. Yeah.
Interesting. I just kind of assume from a B2B standpoint, yeah, there's an overlap. Like you're also on X, you're also on Reddit, but you exist first and foremost on LinkedIn.
Yeah, there's definitely a growing number in e-commerce that are now getting onto LinkedIn, particularly in the last couple of years, but it's not everyone yet.
Okay. All right. So that's distribution. Email included there, and it's really just knowing where your audience lives. I reminisce back to what's her name, Ginny Dietrich's peso model, and kind of was taught about that a long time ago and reference that often. Is that a model that you use, or is that kind of?
I love that model as well, and I would also just add into it with distribution. Don't only play on rented land. Rented land is amazing, particularly on social media and on SEO to kind of get traffic. But make sure that you're also at some way having some sort of own platform that you can own your audience there, or at least have a better chance of that, because algorithms are fickle. you can have a great reach for a little while, and then suddenly LinkedIn or TikTok or Instagram hates you. And suddenly you don't have that reach anymore. So, invest in a newsletter, invest in a podcast, have a blog, have some sort of outlet that you have a little bit more control over. Is super important.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and I was advised a long time ago, put my podcast on my own website so that it is my own owned content, as opposed to just leaving it on the distributed platforms where you have no control over their algorithms and commenting and things like that. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Great advice.
Yeah. And then what's the third channel of the MOAT
Yeah,
platform?
the third one is content efficiency. And that's just making sure that you're doing if you're going to invest all the time on these evergreen assets in particular, like making sure they don't just, get published once. Maybe you tweet it out or you post it on LinkedIn once and then it just collects dust. You want to make sure that you're actually utilizing it in the smartest ways possible. So that can be including having it into a newsletter and doing it, whether that's, as a link or ideally as some sort of mini essay tied to it. Can you turn it into a video? Can you create clips? Can you share it multiple times over? Are there things that you can kind of have as pillars of that can turn into additional articles, additional videos, additional podcasts? Can you do collaborations? Can you take, for example, a webinar and turn that webinar into 10 or 15 other assets that can all work just as hard for you and also give you more reach and give you more feedback and more chances to be able to kind of increase both brand awareness as well as conversions.
So not necessarily share the same thing over and over and over, but take a snippet from whatever, the podcast or the video, or take an article and pull out an excerpt and turn it into a graphic. And so using one thing many different ways.
Exactly. And one of my favorite ways to do that is actually even just on a podcast like this, where this podcast, if it's 25 minutes or 30 minutes long, you can then extract individual angles from it and turn that into individual social clips, or you can even turn that into a larger blog article. You can create additional videos that are shorter. You can do some sort of additional collaborations. There's just turn it into LinkedIn ads, Facebook ads, that sort of thing as well. There's so many different ways you can take an individual asset like this or a webinar and just get a lot more bang for your buck with that.
Okay, so keep coming with the free ideas on what I can do with my podcast content that I don't do currently.
What do you currently do?
Not enough, man. I have 120 hours or so of videos that I don't pull reels out of. I don't pull the snippets. Like you just shared a great gem, and I hit the little M button to bookmark it. I will likely never go and edit that out and share that as a reel because I just don't have the bandwidth for it.
This might be something you might appreciate, and I'm guessing some people listening to this might as well. One of my favorite new ways to do this is I'm sure that most of us now use AI meeting notes apps.
Mm-hmm.
So one of my favorite ways to kind of extract more is to basically take that note, feed it into, I have a custom GPT set up within ChatGPT. I'll feed it into that and be like, okay, analyze all the insights from it. And it will literally pull out insights that I can literally just bookmark and be like, oh, maybe I should, and then build out those video clips or build out those podcast, additional podcasts for it, or blog content or social media posts, all from the 1 30-minute episode I did.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even, the platforms do it now with AI built in. Like we'll pull out magic clips, they call it, and some of them are okay, some of them are better than others. But I think, from my standpoint, it's a bandwidth standpoint. I need to just get somebody to do it for me because I don't have the time or the expertise to do editing. But I think a lot of agencies that do create their own content, what I see is they create very siloed content. And to your point, they're not using it for this kind of distribution wheel of I can create 7 things from one. Mm-hmm. AI can create efficiencies. There's automation tools they can use. What about from like a frequency standpoint in the distribution that you talked about? Is there best practices as far as how often should they be publishing content? Does it matter based on if it's a blog post, a tweet, a Instagram thing?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times people kind of major in minor things and they obsess so much about posting time or making sure you post every single day. And there's an element of truth, particularly to consistency. You're not going to see results if you're only posting once every 8 weeks. Sorry, not going to happen. And it doesn't matter how amazing your content is. You need more than that. I would say in general, if you're on LinkedIn, which I'm guessing most agencies listening to this are, aim for 3 times a week to get started, because that's about the minimum number you need to start to see any sort of consistency, and make sure that you're doing it for at least 3 months. If you just try to, like, the biggest way that you lose on LinkedIn, in my opinion, in my own experience, is if you get really active for a short period of time and then you get really busy, and you don't post anything for 3 months, or 6 months or longer, it's really hard to get that momentum back.
Really? So stick with it, but start with a 90-day to build the muscle memory, to build the habit, to build the systems,
Yeah.
and don't drop off, because that drop off could be detrimental to whatever steam that they've started to gain already.
Absolutely. If you
Yeah.
are going to be in a busy period, at least try to post at least once a week. But ideally, if you want to see results from it, plan on posting at least 3 times a week for 3 months before you start to see that compounding.
And a mix of videos, photos, multi-page PDFs, just opinions, experiences, everything, huh?
Whatever you're going to be able to stick to. I know I should do a lot more video. I personally don't do as much video as it's on my to-do list to do more of it. But like, whatever you can stick to. If it's just text post, do it. If you just want to do photos, if you just want to do video, whatever you can be consistent at is how you're going to win at that.
Yeah. I think there's been a long stretch of people saying, I need to lean into the authenticity of sharing about family life or personal challenges, and not just the tactical, like, here's how you build a website or whatever the thing that they do from a service standpoint. Sure, that's a piece of it, but because we're looking to build business reports and know, like, and trust thing, what's that balance that you see between, like, sharing business topics and sharing about Timmy's T-ball game and, nonsense like that?
I think everybody needs to have their own kind of comfort level. Like, you can definitely go too far into either direction, where if you're just business all the time and you sound like a robot, that's probably not helpful. But you can also go in the exact opposite direction, and suddenly you're like blurring into every single thing as a selfie, or oversharing. That's also bad. So like, you kind of want to blend that line. You want to figure out what that balance is for you. Either extreme, not good, but somewhere in the middle generally is where it goes.
Yeah, I've definitely seen people that kind of over personalize things or are strictly business. And I guess that's them and that's where they're at, and that's okay. Hopefully it resonates with somebody, right?
For sure. I mean, I've definitely seen the one where it's the trauma dumping post.
Yeah.
Where I'm just like, yeah, I'm like, that's great if it's working for you. However, for most agencies, maybe has a little bit less upside than there are potential risk.
How can leaders or agency owners or agencies themselves start with developing like a set of goals of, here's what I want to achieve from a publishing platform or like a content machine? How do they be goal oriented?
Yeah, first and foremost starts with like, what are we trying to do? Like, what is the overarching goal behind everything? What is our SCP? What is kind of our timeline? What is our budget? What's our kind of our team size? What are the tools that we have at our disposal? Think through all of that first, and then kind of reverse engineer down to the tactical level. And at that point, you'll be able to figure out, okay, does that mean, one banger asset a month? And maybe just posting, a little bit here and there to make sure that, we have a pulse on LinkedIn. Or it could be, hey, maybe we have a little bit of a larger team. Let's, do like, the Gary Vee type of play from back in the day where, we're everywhere and we're posting 10 times a day.
Yep. You got to get your little brother to follow you around with a video camera if you want to do that.
Totally.
Awesome. Yeah, really good tips. I know I struggle with content. I know a lot of, creative professionals struggle with content, agency owners, leaders, etc. So super valuable content, great tips. I really appreciate that. Let's wrap up. I want to throw a couple of random rapid fire questions at you.
Sounds great.
I've been calling them that. I don't know if they are actually rapid fire, but anyway, the first is, if you could do only one type of creative work for the rest of your career, what would it be?
Ooh, does it have to be tied to what I do for my business?
No. There's no rules here.
If money was no object, I would do like documentary filmmaking.
Ooh, fun. Any kind of genre of document filmmaking?
International human interest documentary stories. Like, probably one of my absolute like heroes, RIP, would be Anthony Bourdain. RIP.
Yeah.
Got learned so much about like storytelling in that way, and I love documentaries.
Yeah, what a great guy. Tragic heartbreak there. Second is, what's your biggest non-business passion?
Probably tied to this as well, travel.
Okay, cool. Sub question that's not part of these three is based on travel. What's the greatest place you ever visited?
Ooh, that is a really hard question.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if I could say just one place, but I'd probably say like a toss up, as in like I feel like I get the most from travel from either like experiencing the culture or like the people who I was with. So I'd probably say a toss up between northern Thailand and Japan.
Wow, awesome. I have not been to either, so very
I
cool.
would highly
Finally,
recommend it and happy to give Rex.
yeah, it's not on my list, but maybe one day. Finally, what's a non-traditional place that you find inspiration for the work that you do?
That is interesting. Great question. I find a lot of inspiration from like a lot of things in general. I would say like paying attention to what creators do, in completely different niches than like the B2B space. I get a lot of insights from that. I get a lot from Reddit. And then I get a lot from just like exploring new places, whether it's in my hometown or like when I'm traveling.
Yeah, travel for me is a big one. Like I'm 45 minutes out of Manhattan, then going into the city, I always come back with like crazy amounts of ideas and inspiration. So I get that.
Yeah, even just going on a hike, I can get so many ideas that way, or just like hopping on a plane and experiencing another culture,
Mhm.
guaranteed to kind of shift some perspectives.
Awesome. Great input. Jessica, thank you so much for your time, your expertise, your value that you brought to this podcast. Folks, check out jessicamalnik.com. Great resources and information, and sign up for her newsletter.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks again for tuning in to Agency Bytes. If you know someone with expert knowledge on a topic that agency owners would love to hear about, go to agencyoutsight.com/podcast-guest and nominate them.